Hello, Rimini. It is a pleasure and a privilege once again to be speaking and engaging with you in this evening. So thank you very much for everyone who have come through. I understand it's the evening, but I would like you and all of you to give yourself an applause for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you.
Grazie, grazie. You'll forgive me, I'm still learning my Italian, but I promise you next time when I come, I'll be speaking Italian. I'll probably be dreaming in Italian as well. I'm here and joined today in this evening by my fellow social justice activist, Dr. Savo Heleta. I've known Dr. Savo Heleta for quite some time now, and it is such an honor and a privilege to be joined in a dialogue with him and actually to be asking him some questions, and hopefully you can join us as well in this dialogue. Dr. Savo, as we all have been engaged in conversation in this platform at We Make Future 2022, and I said it earlier on that I've been pondering and wondering how do we define our future as this generation, and how do we define the future of the generations yet to come, and our responsibilities in defining how that future should look like. And as someone that is largely engaged on issues around climate change, climate justice, I would like you to probably give us a perspective of how does our future look like? Both our future and both our present within the context of climate change.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a long day, but it's been also an amazing day. I'm not going to say anything in Italian. First time in Italy. Hopefully next time I can say something. Thank you, Sia. We go a long way. Sia was my student, my undergraduate student, my postgraduate student, and since then we're working a lot together on the issues of social justice. But to go back to your question, how does our future look like when we take climate change into consideration? I'll try to be hopeful tonight, but there is so much to be worried about. There's so much to be concerned about, because it is going to be the most defining and most critical issue facing all of us. It is, for a very long time, for many decades, climate change and climate destruction have been affecting poor countries. And for a very long time, it's not been a global issue. Only when it became very obvious and clear through science and research and through actual extreme weather and extreme conditions around the world, and when it became an issue in the rich countries, in the global north, in Europe, in North America specifically, it became a global issue. And that is something that we have to always think about. We have to think about where we're going with as the world. A lot of research by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us that there is a small window of opportunity for us to act, and to act immediately to adapt to and to mitigate climate change. Because if we reach, by 2030, if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold of temperature rises globally, we're going to enter a terrain that will bring unthinkable suffering to many parts of the world. About 3.2 billion people around the world will be affected by extreme impacts of climate change if we reach 1.5%. The scientists are telling us that we're going to breach 1.5% and probably go over 2%. It is going to bring unthinkable suffering around the world. And we're talking about We Make Future. And there are a lot of young people here in the audience, and I think there is a huge responsibility on us, on you, on on people around the world, and specifically on young people, to act, to organize, to go and engage with policymakers and make them become responsible and do whatever it takes to think about long term, to think about your future, our future, everybody's future, but more specifically your future, because the policymakers will leave the world to you, and if they leave the broken world to you, that is highly unethical, and it's highly unjust. And I think you have a responsibility to organize, to keep fighting for a better world, but better world for all, and not just the privileged and the rich parts of the world.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Savo. Actually, thank you. The points that you are raising are actually very critical. They are critical because the effects of climate change are issues that we are experiencing now. And I will tell you one thing. I come from South Africa, particularly the city of Port Elizabeth. And I'll be honest to you and say, just before I took my flight here to Rimini, I missed and I almost came to Rimini without taking a shower because we are few days before ground day zero, where there's completely no access to water in Port Elizabeth, for instance. And those are climate change impacts and effects that are happening right now. And we are currently scrambling to find ways to address such effects in Port Elizabeth. And my fellow Italian family and community in Port Elizabeth will probably be sharing this similar sentiments right now. So the impacts of climate change are things that we are actually experiencing now. And I was wondering, as people that are also coming from peace and conflict resolution studies, there are sentiments that the wars of today's and wars of tomorrow will be fought and influenced by climate change. What is your role? What is your understanding and in terms of the relationship between conflict, violent conflict as we know it happening in the world today, and climate change?
Yeah, this is another very important issue to talk about, and this is not going to be something new. This has been happening for a very long time. Climate change has been impacting many societies and leading to not necessarily being a cause of conflict, but being one of the contributing factors for people to end up in a disagreement and end up fighting. For example, in Darfur region in Sudan, climate change was one of the causes of displacement of a lot of people and communities, and when they had to move into other communities, they got in, began having issues, and those issues were politicized, and some of those issues led to some of the conflict. The current conflict in Syria was in part caused by some of the droughts and people losing their livelihoods and losing hope, and having to go out and protest, and those protests were police brutality came in, and a lot of things happened that finally led to an all-out conflict in places in Syria. Currently in Somalia, about 1 million people are displaced due to climate change, due to droughts. And as you said, the wars of tomorrow will be fought over water, over land, productive land where people can grow food. There is a big issue in the Horn of Africa between a number of countries such as Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, over the Nile River. And this is an area we have to look at and look at really closely, because it can become a regional war in that part of Africa. Climate change is seen as a threat multiplier. So you have a lot of issues in a lot of these, communities that are either divided politically, ethnically, socially, and climate change can put pressures on the societies and intensify already existing troubles and the problems. And this is why we, both of us come from the academic field of conflict and peace studies, and we keep trying to convince more and more young people that this is an area that they should consider in terms of their studies and their future work, because we will need more people around the world to have the skills for negotiation, for mediation, for conflict analysis, for peace building, because the world of tomorrow is very likely to be a far more difficult place than the world already is. And the world is a highly difficult place now, and highly conflict-affected place now. So if any of you here want to challenge yourself to try, if you ask, how can I make difference? Study, learn, develop skills that then you can use those skills to develop, to help others, whether that is in Italy, in Europe, in other parts of the world.
Yeah, well, just as we're about to wrap up this conversation, and you know I'm an activist, right? So you'll forgive me for asking this question, but one of the things that I talked about less is the contribution of first world countries in the crisis of climate change that is confronting us today. And maybe some of the things that are not even spoken about is how does climate change justice look like, because many of the countries that are suffering today, they're suffering as a result of the consequences made by first world countries. Maybe let me be a troublemaker and say America, for instance, the UK, for instance, and many of the developed countries here in Europe that have contributed immensely into the problem of climate change. How does climate change justice, if there's such a term, how does it look like? As an activist, I just have to throw that out there. How does climate justice look like?
There's nothing wrong with being a troublemaker. Troublemakers are people who ask difficult questions that those in power often don't like, and we need to do that. You need to do that. You need to be the troublemakers, of course, peacefully. But this is a very important point, an important question, and this is not us making things up. The stats that exist, the science tells us that, for example, since 1850, the human-induced climate change, the contributors are United States or North America with 26%, Western Europe with 13%, Asia with 12%, the whole of African continent only 7%. The small island states have contributed 0.5% historically to climate change. The poorest countries in the world, many of them, have contributed 0.4%, yet it is the poorest countries that are the most negatively affected over the past few decades and will be the most negatively affected. Some of those island states will completely disappear as the seas continue to rise. And so how do we move forward? And the key issue here, and I really hope that when you have free time, you can read about just transition and climate justice and climate reparations, because I mean, if somebody commits a crime, if somebody breaks your car, they should be held responsible for breaking your car. And so if somebody broke the climate for their own benefits, for their own enrichment, the poor countries around the world that are negatively affected and the poor people around the world that are negatively affected have to be able to get justice for all the injustices that were done to them. And so when we talk about climate justice, when we talk about just transition, we're saying it is not about charity for the rich world to pay for, improving the livelihoods of the people in the poor countries. It is the price that you have to pay for the bad things that you have done over the past few centuries, and it is the issue of justice. And I think, this is something that I'm hoping more and more of us, especially young people, will organize around. And I think, if we make future, if we contribute to making the future, we have to contribute to making a better future where there is justice for all, where there is equality for all, and not for the powerful and the rich.
Thank you, Dr. Savo, for such informative discussion and contribution in this dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, particularly to the younger generation, to the young people out there, we have a collective responsibility to define how our future would look like, whether we're speaking of peace, justice, and human rights. So it is upon us to define and to decide how that future look like. Thank you, Dr. Savo, for such a wonderful discussion. Grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to Savo Heleta and Siyabulela Mandela to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Savo.
You are here to build the future together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Grazie.